The Empire of Izmir has long been a divided land, ruled by the mages, an elite group of magic users. The lowly commoners, those without magic, are little more than slaves. Izmir's young empress, Savina, wishes equality and prosperity for all. But the evil mage, Profion, has other intentions.
Welcome to Now Playing Podcast's Dungeons & Dragons Movie Retrospective Series.
Adventure, battle, glory beyond your wildest imagination.
Part of our board game movie retrospective series.
You want to play, do you?
Yeah, let's play.
We're gonna need a team.
Team? Who's gonna help us out?
Hosted by Arnie.
The fact that you see good in me makes me believe that there might just be some in there.
Justin.
See that there? I knew that boy had talent.
And Stuart.
You use magic. We are part of it.
But be warned, this episode will contain detailed plot spoilers and strong language.
There might be a loss of distinction between reality and fantasy, and possibly the loss of life in the process.
We hope you enjoy the show.
Let the journey begin.
Today we're discussing Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, starring Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Rege-Jean Page, Justice Smith, Sophia Lillis, and Hugh Grant, directed by Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly. This is Arnie, co-host of Now Playing, and I will not be complicit in the getting of ill-gotten booty.
And Stuart.
And I'm your well-read fisherman with secrets, Justin.
Welcome to the fifth and final D&D movie, if we're counting Mazes and Monsters. We did. Don't know why. And the big one, right? The one that they actually tried. Hasbro, I would say, very modest efforts so far in trying to make what you tell me is their most successful property into a proper tentpole franchise film. But this one was a big one. $150 million put out on Dungeons & Dragons in the year 2023.
Yeah, that wasn't the original plan. Courtney Solomon, director of that first year 2000 Dungeons & Dragons movie, announced in 2013 that he was rebooting the franchise. He still owned the rights, and he was writing a new script and working with Warner Brothers on getting another Dungeons & Dragons movie made for theaters as compared to those two direct-to-video sequels. And then, 2 days after the announcement from Warner Brothers, came Hasbro's legal team saying, no, you don't. And it became a big legal battle over who actually owns the rights to Dungeons & Dragons. Courtney Solomon may be able to play with TSR, but you don't mess with Hasbro lawyers.
Yeah, and I'm not usually one to jump up and down supporting corporate America, but in this case, get him! Get that franchise out of his hands!
Yeah, far be it from me to sit here thinking in a series of movies that I'd be rooting for a Hasbro release, but here we are.
And then this thing kind of went through development hell. Hasbro was working with Universal Pictures on it. They had a number of writers come in and out, including actor Joe Manganiello, who I primarily know from being Flash in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie, but I think most people know him because he was on True Blood, I think it was.
And a famous Hollywood D&D player. He hosts parties and celebs go to his house to roll them dice.
Yeah, he worked on a script for the project, and he wanted to star in it back in about 2017, and he was looking at maybe having The Rock co-star with him, but after being in development hell, Hasbro gave this film to Paramount, who'd been doing all those Transformer films for them, and Paramount was like, we got a go picture, we're gonna have it out in 2021.
Ouch.
Yeah, COVID hit, and so they eventually got this thing going. They brought in directors Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly, who were looking for work. These two guys, they've co-directed several films before. I have seen most, or I guess all of their filmography as directors. The movie Vacation, that reboot of the Chevy Chase film, starring Ed Helms.
Yeah, Horrible Bosses, which I find that a funny movie.
Yeah, they wrote Horrible Bosses, but they directed Vacation. They wrote Spider-Man Homecoming, which is a weaker Spider-Man film, but still not bad. They directed Game Night, which was that Jason Bateman, Rachel McAdams movie. I kind of enjoyed it. They were working on The Flash, and they walked away from that project. They were like, no, we're just not going to be involved in this. And the guy who was working on this is like, do you guys need work? And they're like, yes, please. We just screwed our reputation by walking off The Flash. And they're like, well, Dungeons & Dragons is available.
Yeah, and it's funny, I know John Francis Daley as an actor. He started off on Freaks and Geeks. He was the main kid there, Sam.
I never watched that show, but I know it's beloved, and I never watched Bones, but I guess he was a beloved character on that show as well. Yes, that one of these is an actor, and one of these is more of the writer-director, and they're a team. They've been at this for about a decade now, and moved from in front of the screen to behind the screen. It's always an interesting move. You always appreciate what actors can bring that directors that aren't brave enough to perform might not have.
And it was an interesting collaboration because John Francis Daley said the first time he ever really was exposed to Dungeons & Dragons is when his Freaks and Geeks character was playing it. Whereas Jonathan Goldstein says the reason he's a filmmaker is because he grew up playing Dungeons & Dragons and wanted to tell stories and things. So we had one D&D loyalist and one D&D newbie kind of coming together, which is a good balance. They're like, we want to pay homage to the D&D fans out there without getting so bogged down in lore that a newbie can't approach it.
That was definitely my question is this made by fans or is this made by people who didn't get it and are kind of mocking the cult of D&D?
No, they were very clear. They never wanted to make fun of the property. This isn't a parody film, but they wanted it to be a lighthearted film. And they were looking a lot at Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail as inspiration for this. They even wanted to get the Monty Python guys to do the voices of the resurrected corpses later on, but the Monty Python people were either unaffordable or dead. They got some Australian comedy troupe to do those voices, though, if you see this in Australia. But I don't know that Australian comedy troupe. But they were looking at, they were looking at Guardians of the freaking Galaxy is what they were looking at.
And why wouldn't they? Again, Hasbro wants hits. Like, they have these games. We want to have Marvel-sized hits. They aren't alone in that. Everyone covets, if not the Marvel seal of approval, at least that money, right? The bank that you can make. That was what they were hoping for. And I don't think that this property quite cinched it, even though it did make, I think, about $200 million. Given the price tag for this thing, I don't know that that's called a success.
Yeah, that's $200 million global on a $150 million budget. By the time you take into account marketing and the fact that theaters keep roughly half of that money, that means Paramount lost a lot of money on this.
It feels that way. And it felt like, help me out. I know that this says 2023, but it feels like when this movie was being advertised and they were saying, come see it, there was still a lot of trepidation that I think mass audiences had about going back to a movie theater. COVID fears were real still.
Not when this finally came out. This was supposed to come out in July of 2021. Then it got moved to November of 2021 so that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 could come out. Then it got pushed to May 2022 due to COVID, and finally to March of 2023. But this was filmed in 2021, so it sat around for like 2 years. But keep in mind, this came out the week after John Wick 4, the week before Super Mario Brothers. People were going to theaters. Mario made a lot of money.
I think COVID did affect it in the fact that this movie has Comic-Con written all over it. And there were no Comic-Cons for this movie to debut at and have the hype start going around.
There was. I was at San Diego Comic-Con in 2022, and they had a Dungeons & Dragons tavern there where you could go. They premiered the Dungeons & Dragons trailer at Comic-Con and then released it online. They were pushing this at Comic-Con in 22 when we all had to wear masks at SDCC.
That's what I mean. It still feels impacted by COVID. Again, I get that you're right. Movies were making money again in 2023, but I feel like maybe certain audiences, like we're okay with kids going back to the theater, but adults aren't going to go. And I do remember that was the challenge. I even remember the ad campaign was really targeting about like, do you know how funny this movie is, guys? You really should come see this movie. It was almost like begging you to not think of it as a fantasy film, but as a great comedy that adult audiences that grew up on D&D would appreciate.
Yeah, the trailer for this absolutely felt like it was going for that Thor Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy vibe. It's Led Zeppelin music while you see Chris Pine instead of Chris Pratt or Chris Hemsworth doing some antics on screen. And I remember in theaters, we were going to theaters a lot around that time for Now Playing. Before movie, I don't even know if this was a trailer or just an advertisement, but the scene where they resurrect the first dead guy and get to ask him 5 questions, they just played that clip in toto before movies. I saw that like 5 times before I ever saw this movie.
Yeah, they were doing a lot of that. There was a couple scenes in this movie that I feel like I had seen like a good 5-7 minute chunk of it previously.
Yeah, they pushed it hard. I remember there was a real, it felt like exasperation because, again, the movie didn't make money. It didn't bring them in, but it felt like they were screaming, you guys would love this. You guys really should come to this. This is as good as a Marvel movie that you're going to go see in theaters. Please patronize this. And they didn't quite get there.
No, I didn't go. Just a little behind the scenes of Now Playing. John Wick Chapter 4 came out the week before this. I was in theaters watching John Wick. The trailers were running before John Wick when I get a phone call that my mother has died. And I go, well, thanks for letting me know. And then I go back and watch John Wick. And so the week this came out, I was at my mother's funeral. So I was not at the movies for this. But I was interested in it because of Chris Pine and the vibe from the trailer. I like Chris Pine as an actor. I think he was great in those Star Trek movies, and he existed in those Wonder Woman movies. And
existed? He stole those movies. He was better than Wonder Woman. Chris Pine is the best Chris. I can't think of a better Chris.
I honestly would be tempted to agree with you. I think Chris Pratt, I would have called the best Chris for a while.
The worst.
No, I mean, Star-Lord is so good, and what did Chris Pine have to compete with Star-Lord? But Chris Pine, he feels to me like the runner-up Chris. Like, his Jack Ryan thing didn't quite work out, his Wonder Woman thing didn't quite work out, his Star Trek thing sort of worked out, but then fizzled. He's had some good one-off movies that I've enjoyed him in, but it never feels like he's become the big star he might have been meant to be.
I think he's definitely outrisen the Nepo baby tag that might have been put on him because his father was an actor as well, right? Like, I feel like his stardom is brighter than Robert Pine's, who played on Chips.
Yeah, I mean, come on, he was the sergeant on Chips. What kind of Nepo baby is that?
Yeah, that just gets you a Chips reboot series, right?
Right, but Chips is a beloved series that still 50 years later people know about, right? Like, it's not like it was some show that came and went and nobody ever talked about again. But yeah, my point is that Chris has risen above. He's not slumming it for parts.
He's why I saw this movie. I did watch this one. I waited till it came out on Paramount Plus, I believe.
I did see this in 2024. I had to look up when I watched it, but I did buy it on Apple TV as a movie one night when we were just looking for something to watch. I was excited thinking that we'd have a fun time. And I'll just preview, I was really disappointed in this movie. And I walked away thinking it was a definite not recommend. Maybe better than the slog of movies we've gone through so far, but I wasn't really looking forward to coming back to this one either.
Oh, wow. My memories were mostly positive. And again, what I remember liking about it most was Chris Pine.
And this is my first time sitting down with it. I mean, I'd seen all the ads and all that stuff, and I was aware that it was pushed back. And, you know, if I really wanted to see it, I was aware of it. I could have seen it, but for some reason I never did.
You and everyone else. The world said the same thing.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if maybe it would have been a better plan at that time for them to maybe push it out to a streaming service during COVID in 2022 and make it an event.
Yeah. Hindsight being what it is, we can never know, but it does feel like this movie, well, we have the opportunity now to, yes, have it almost really be the tail end of all the board game movies. Clue kicked it off, and this one, more or less, is bringing it to a close if Jumanji isn't quite. It's a movie about a fake board game, right? It's not a real board game.
No, that's not a real board game. We're just doing a Jumanji retrospective series, but it's not part of the board game series because it's not a real board game. Otherwise, if we'd have to include game night, too.
Yeah, well, who says we won't if we get desperate? But yeah, Clue was underrated in its day. Let's find out if Honor Among Thieves shares that.
Chris Pine is Edgin Darvis. Years ago, Edgin was a selfless member of the Harper's faction, a spy against evil. But one day, Edgin is tempted to steal the gold of an evil red wizard. The other red wizards track the gold to Edgin's home and kill Edgin's beloved wife. Edgin's daughter Kira was hidden during the attack, so Edgin raised her as a single father. Edgin became a drunkard when he was discovered by barbarian Holga Kilgore, played by Michelle Rodriguez. Holga gets Edgin to sober up, and the two become thieves together. Holga also becomes a surrogate mother to Kira. The two join forces with con man Forge Fitzwilliam, played by Hugh Grant, and blundering half-elf sorcerer Simon Omar, played by Justin Smith. The foursome are hired by a sorceress named Sophina to rob a Harper stronghold. Only a Harper can enter the place, and so Edgin is uniquely suited. Edgin doesn't want to do the job, but in the stronghold is a tablet of reawakening which can bring his wife back to life, so Edgin agrees. Inside the stronghold, Edgin is betrayed. He and Holga are captured, but he has Forge promised to take care of Kira. Edgin and Holga spend the next 2 years in prison and then mount a daring escape. They return to find Forge has become the ruler of Neverwinter. He has taken care of Kira, but lied to the girl, saying she was abandoned by Edgin and Holga, and that the two only care about the tablet, which Forge tells the girl will bring them riches, not resurrect Kira's mother. Forge is also working with Sophina, who is a red wizard. Forge orders Edgin and Holga executed, but they escape. They then reunite with Simon in an attempt to rob Forge and steal the Tablet of Reawakening, and thus get Kira back. Simon also suggests they get help from a shape-shifting tiefling druid named Doric, played by Sophia Lillis. Simon had tried to court Doric, but she broke up with him due to his low self-esteem. The foursome discover Forge's vault is protected by powerful magic, and they need the Helm of Disjunction to overcome it. So they quest for the helm, which is in the possession of Paladin Zenek Yandar, played by Rege-Jean Page, who then helps them retrieve it. Simon does not have the confidence to use the helm, so Edgin comes up with an alternate plan to rob the vault. They try and are captured, and the four are forced to participate in Forge's deadly High Sun games. They escape Forge's maze and learn Forge has robbed the townspeople and is preparing to leave on a treasure-filled boat. The four overpower Forge and steal his boat, but then Sophina starts a spell to turn all the townspeople into an army of zombies. Edgin and the others turn back, giving up their gold in exchange for justice. Simon finds the confidence he needs to fight Sophina in a magical battle, but he needs help from all his friends to overpower the sorceress. Sophina is defeated, but in the fight, Holga was mortally wounded. The Tablet of Reawakening can only be used once, but Edgin uses it to bring Holga back to life instead of his dead wife. The adventurers continue on to their next quest, with Simon and Doric as a couple, as credits roll.
Yeah, and as we start, we see the Paramount logo, lots of ice, lots of snow, setting us up for a harsh prison tower. And if you hadn't seen the trailers for this movie, you might think that this is a Dungeons and Dragons movie crafted in a grim, maybe Game of Thrones style. There's a orc being dragged in on they're so fearful of what he might do that they put him on a track and march him past cells of all these different monsters. And until he sees his cellmates, they don't break the poker face. This looks like a stark, gripping action movie.
Kind of, but the orc does not look menacing. He looks like a guy in a costume. He kind of reminds me of Sweetums, the Muppet, the big brown hairy guy with the teeth. And so if this orc were more dangerous looking and more practical looking, I'd probably take it more seriously than I do as it is. Yes, they're playing it to the hilt that this is super dangerous and a dark moment, but that is a beat they don't hold very long.
Certainly not when we see that his cellmates are knitting and eating potatoes, and they're played with the kind of comedic panache that is very Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it's pretty easy to spot that they want to capture the quirky comedy of that kind of standout Marvel side quest.
Including a prison breakout. I mean, remember, the first movie, Guardians of the Galaxy, they were all brought together in prison where Drax was already arrested, and they mounted a big breakout from that prison in that 2014 film. So here, I'm definitely getting those vibes I did from the trailer. And yeah, Chris Pine is doing his best Chris Pratt.
We're here in this scene to introduce our first two characters, right? We're going to find out that Chris Pine, Edgin, he's just Ed to me.
Ed, don't say Edgin ever again. I hate it too much.
Ed is going to be the smooth talker who, doesn't lift a finger when necessary, and Helga's here to be the muscle. And, it's kind of playing against hype a little bit. I think it sets us up nicely, you don't mess with a woman eating her potato and she kicks his ass.
We know what movie we're in from that point on. And I think it's helpful to start with this kind of joke and then give us as much backstory as we need. They've been in this prison for 2 years. They're up for parole. So this gives them a chance to make their plea and tell us how they got here. It's a television trope, right? Is to do something exciting and then flash back to how we got here. This seems like a good plan on bringing us into this world. I think that featuring this movie on thieves, and specifically Chris Pine's thief, was a good idea.
I agree, especially since he's kind of a lovable thief with a very sympathetic backstory. And I'm glad that we didn't start this movie with an information dump voiceover, but we're going to get this flashback. It's told in such a fun way, though. Chris Pine, I'm not going to say he's a great thespian, but I like him as a movie star. But I do see a lot of Captain Kirk in his performance here as Rege-Jean, where he's trying to stall the judges, much like when he was on trial for the Kobayashi Maru cheating.
Yeah, you can tell early on this movie is written for Chris Pine and his attitude towards this.
I don't know. I honestly think you could have put any Chris in this role. It wasn't written for Chris Pine. Any of the Chris's could do this and have done this.
But I want to remind folks, and it's a painful memory, I think, for some, but I struggle with Guardians, and part of that was Pratt. It is because whenever you have a extremely sarcastic comedy where you put forward a character that is so deadpan and ambivalent towards the plot that's going to be coming at him, it can make you feel like he doesn't care about anyone or anything. And I think the dance that they do here is that I truly believe that Ed has a family and a child that he loves, and he's kind of hiding in telling this story his role in their demise. We see him take this oath. We see him be a do-gooder and, pretend to play the lute and take down notes and spy and catch evil wizards. And he just brushes over the fact that he walks past a pile of gold as he's carrying that red wizard to justice. This is the story of him coming to terms with guilt and not being such a great guy. I think that is a dramatic turn that I don't always see in a Deadpool movie or some of these other movies.
Yeah, that will be his arc, is that he comes to terms with who he actually is and his own actions.
That there is Honor Among Thieves. It's a good title. That is about rogues that, yes, spit in the face of real danger and do all the things that we love in our 21st century comedies, and yet there's heart, there's real stakes, and there's a responsibility that he's going to take.
And we're getting this backstory in this montage flashback. We do see him glance at gold, and knowing that he was arrested for being a thief, I thought he was going to take it. I mean, it's a noticeable look at that piece of gold, and the fact that he didn't at that point was shocking. Of course, we're going to find out later, they're going to revisit this flashback, and he did palm some of that gold. But they're keeping this light and snappy because they keep cutting back to Chris Pine in front of the judges, and he keeps saying, is Jonathan coming? Where's Jonathan? He was going to be one of the people judging whether or not Rege-Jean and Holga got parole, was Jonathan. And they mentioned earlier that he was Aarakocra. And what I learned is that in the lore of Forgotten Realms, Aarakocra don't like imprisonment. So we're supposed to think that if Jonathan just comes, that he's just anti-imprisonment and he'll be for them for that reason. So if you know the lore, this whole where's Jonathan thing is even more of a joke on you, because what they're really doing is waiting for this giant Birdman to come so they can jump out a window with him.
Aarakocra, isn't Lee Aarakocra, isn't that who saved Chrysler? I don't know what you're talking about in terms of this beast. But again, I'd have to go back to the manuals. I do wonder, if you like D&D, is there enough of the campaign here? I hazard a guess of saying, as someone that never played by the official rules very well, probably. This is enough D&D, even though it's mostly a comedy. It's more Holy Grail Monty Python than I think it is any D&D movie we've talked about prior. But I do think, yeah, there's enough creatures here. They're just more irreverent. You know, they got a dragon sitting on this council with his arms folded, and of course the white dude is like in charge of it all. Like, it's funny, but I do think that if you took the humor out, you could probably play this as a campaign.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. I think the biggest element of playing Dungeons and Dragons has got to be world building, right? The more world building you do, the more engrossed you can get. And I think out of all the films we've sat through, this one is paying the most homage to building a world filled with different characters and fun names and all that. As much as I hate the name Rege-Jean, I'm loving the name Jonathan. Every time they say it, it's getting a little smile out of me.
And I love that it's a practical costume. This guy comes in, he looks like a team mascot, right? If you remember the St. Louis chicken that used to be at all the baseball games and things, he kind of reminds me of that. But they're not afraid to go with practicals here and have just a big stunt man in a bird suit coming in. And yet the puppet facial expressions are really well done in a funny way. You couldn't get away with using this puppet in a more serious film, but it is absolutely perfect for the tone they're setting here. When they jump out the window and are plummeting and they have to remind the bird he can fly, the bird is just screaming like he's gonna crash to his death. I'm enjoying this a lot more than I remembered enjoying it.
And, of course, don't forget the punchline, which is that this council, even though they had stone faces and seemed ill-humored throughout this supposedly sympathetic backstory, they were actually going to pardon them. This is totally unnecessary. And I think that's true of Ed's whole thing, right? His plans are oftentimes overly convoluted, go sideways, unnecessary. It's part of his charm. Yes, it didn't need to be this way.
But the goal is to get back to Kira, because we saw in the flashback that they had taken this to, Rege-Jean became an alcoholic and Holga took pity on the baby and sobered him up and taught him how to rob better. So they got Simon, a so-so sorcerer, and the con man Forge, Hugh Grant. And when everything went wrong, robbing the Harper keep, Rege-Jean made Forge agree to take care of Kira and gave him the tablet of reawakening. And Forge didn't just raise Kira's mom and say, you take her. Forge became a father to this girl, we see.
Yeah, he also became the Grand Master from Ragnarok, right? He's Jeff Goldblum lording over this town all of a sudden.
Yeah, this is where you write a role for a Hollywood actor to do their shtick. And I couldn't think of a movie. You guys helped me out. As many movies as we covered, I don't think we covered Hugh Grant. This might be the first time. But I like this guy. He has convinced me. Over the years, he's consistently, I know he's got kind of a babbling shtick and made too many mediocre rom-coms, but peppered in there's been some really good roles. I really did enjoy him in About a Boy. More recently, he was in a TV miniseries, A Very British Scandal, that was very funny. The horror movie Heretic, he was up for awards for that one, and with good reason. He's really good. And I think that, like Jeff Goldblum, he certainly knows how to play a villain.
What I find really interesting about him is the change in his character. Because, yes, you say too many rom-coms, and not counting Lair of the White Worm, his early roles were being this bumbling, stuttering, innocent guy, right? Who was always just too polite and going to win over the woman with his smile and his shyness.
He just had to stammer out, "I love you." We had to just wait for him to be able to say it, and then all our hearts would melt. And sometimes that worked too. I mean, again, I liked For Weddings and a Funeral, but it became a shtick. It became tiresome.
Well, what happened, in my view, is he got caught with a prostitute in Los Angeles while he was dating Elizabeth Hurley, and all of a sudden, this "I'm a cute, bumbling, virginal little boy" shtick didn't work, and he grew into a much better, lovable Lothario character. I mean, yes, he still had a couple of movies that he was that same character in, like Notting Hill, but by the time of Bridget Jones' Diary, he was embracing kind of the darker side of himself, where he was a hunk that Bridget wanted to get with, but he was the bad boy. He was the one we didn't want her to get with. We wanted her to go over with the guy who would be in the Kingsman movies, Colin Firth. I think he really became a fun but darker character out of the whole Divine Brown situation.
Yeah, I think it allowed him to be more complicated than Hollywood wanted to make him. And we're better for it because he's got a real good wink. He will really relish in being devilish. We know. Again, it's sort of skirted over the fact that he's just one of this team when we see this flashback, but we can spot it right away. He's the villain of the piece. It's very clear that he's the one that sets up the idea of raiding this keep because it has a tablet that will bring back the dead wife. And that is obviously the thing that Ed couldn't resist. He was walking away. He wasn't going to do the job. He was going to be a loving father, but it's because Hugh Grant is such a good con man that he goes in for that one last job, and that's why he wound up in prison.
Yeah, I don't think I knew the first time I watched this that Hugh Grant was the villain, but I knew as soon as I saw him that Hugh Grant was going to be the villain. And yes, I hope someday we cover it, but I loved Heretic and thought he was a wonderful villain in that. Here, he's not nearly as dark as he is in Heretic, but he's going to be a fun villain, and just his very British mannerisms here, his laugh, his politeness, his complaining that the tea is just way too hot and no tea ever needs to be this hot, is telling me he's betraying his friends. The fact that he's living the high life while they were in prison for 2 years already just reeks that he's betrayed them.
Yeah, he's a con man that you can honestly believe people would be brought in by. You can see him talking out of both sides of his mouth, but if you're only hearing one part of that conversation, I can see getting taken in by him.
And Kira has had that happen. Again, the baby was saved, stashed away when the job was going bad. It was Ed begging Hugh Grant to please take care of my daughter until I can get back to her. Now that they're trying to get back to her, it's clear that she has been poisoned, that he has lied, that Forge has basically made it seem like Dad cared more about riches than being in her life. And he's I like this detail. He's a narcissist. We know as soon as they get to his village, he's got giant posters of himself all over, hot air balloons with his face on it. He wants to be worshipped. He sees fatherhood as another form of that. He wants Kira in his life, not because he wants to care for her, but because he wants her to adore him.
Yeah, and this is where he kind of turns coat on them a little bit, and Ed and Holga realize that, he really has not changed. He's still a double-sided talker, and he's gonna turn them over to be executed? Is that right? Did he say kill them?
Not really. He says, I want the bounty. These guys broke out of prison. There are wanted posters around. Send them back to prison and collect the money. But this is the part we haven't talked about yet. He's collaborating with what he believes is a servant who is helping out with this. A Thayan Red Wizard. I don't remember any of that from the D&D manuals. Is that a really badass wizard?
I do not know. I can only tell you what this movie says, which is they are horrible and their curse is so bad that it takes special magic if you are killed by one of them. You can't just use the regular necromancy.
Yeah, when they did the keep job, she was the one that brought it to them, and she went for something that was a horn. We don't really know why. We don't really understand that, but we will find out that even though she's in servitude of Hugh Grant, who has now taken the identity of a lord and is running a whole village with his face all over everything, she's the true evil. Behind all of this, these red wizards are plotting a lot. And she was the one, after Hugh Grant walks out of the room, that says, don't send them back to prison, put them on their knees, chop off their head.
I did catch that she was evil and really pulling the strings, but I don't know that I caught her giving that order, because I was a little confused when we find them in the streets and they're about to get their heads lopped off.
She whispers it, and I don't know if that's enchantment or not, but she clearly has magic powers for evil. And again, these are the people that killed Ed's wife. So he's got all the reason in the world not to trust her.
And this is another scene. You mentioned, Justin, that you'd seen so much of this film before seeing it. But this scene where they're about to get their heads chopped off, I'd also seen before this movie somewhere, you know? I don't know if they released clips on YouTube or somewhere, but I remember seeing Michelle Rodriguez asking about what oil do you use to clean your axe while she's getting this brick out of the ground, and then watching Chris Pine just laying on the side trying to cut his ropes while Michelle Rodriguez is beating everybody up. I remember seeing that, and yeah, that made me want to see this film. It was a definite, funny action scene.
Michelle Rodriguez, for me, is a real revelation here. I had a real deep concept about what she is, and this movie isn't it. She's done, from her first film, Girl Fight, where she was a boxer, the Fast and Furious series, Avatar. I feel like she's usually cast as the woman that is not very feminine, that doesn't have a sense of humor about her, that is very much bravado and toughness. I haven't seen her with comedic skills, I don't think, unless you count laughing at the Fast and Furious series.
See, you and I are going to disagree on this one then, because I think she is an anchor that sinks this boat. I feel like she is always the same in every movie where she is the tough woman, and she did put on muscle and proudly brag she didn't shave her pits for this role so she could be a real barbarian, but I don't feel like she has a performance here. If we're doing this and Chris Pratt is Star-Lord, this is supposed to be our Gamora, right? She's supposed to be the badass warrior, but she lacks any of the nuance and the characterization that Zoe Saldana put in Gamora. Here, I find Michelle Rodriguez to be the same thing Michelle Rodriguez always plays, and we've seen in those Fast and Furious films, when they ask her to do drama, she sucks. She can't act. She can only be tough. And here, she's tough, but I don't find her jokes landing, and I don't think she has chemistry with anybody on screen who she ever plays on this whole movie. She feels like she's off doing her own thing, and it was shocking to me to see the behind the scenes that she was smiling and laughing and looked like she wanted to be there, because that does not come out in her performance. I thought she was just going through the motions.
I can see where you're coming from, Arnie, but also I think you're mistaken in thinking that she's playing Gamora here. She's playing Drax. There's no love connection here. Her character and Edgin's character are brother and sisterly. This isn't a love story between them. If there's any love story, it's going to be between Simon and the druid, Zorik.
Yeah, I agree. And again, you say that she's the same in every movie. She's not funny in every movie. This is the only time I've ever seen her in a comedy. Again, you're right. It's cringy when she's doing melodrama in Fast and the Furious. You laugh at her. Here, you're laughing with her. And I feel like she has good interplay. I really do like the way that they've calculated this. You could say that they do have a love, but it's unspoken. in the end, she's helped raise a child platonically. And she loves Ed in certain ways, but it is never romantic. She has a type. She needs him to be at least 3 feet shorter.
They mentioned she had an ex and that they were too different, but I really thought she was just playing a lesbian until we see Bradley Cooper show up.
Well, again, people mistake him for husband and wife, and she's like, ooh, with those lips. Again, I think all that stuff works. I mean, I think it's got some humor. If your comparison is that she's not Zoe Saldana, you're right. There is archetypes. They are following a formula, but I don't feel like this is a slavish ripoff of Guardians. I think that they looked at Guardians and said, we want to do that in a D&D world.
Yeah, and also, I do recognize it, Arnie, because I do feel that trope coming on, and once the credits are rolling, I don't think that I miss that trope being in this movie. I don't need every movie to be a meet cute where our two people that are diametrically opposed personality-wise come together somehow.
They take care of each other. I mean, I love the fact that he's a bard and he can just sing these silly songs and that can kind of snap her out of her mood. They take care of each other. They like each other. They love each other. It's just not in the way that we usually see man and women love each other in a movie. And so, yes, this is Act 2. They realize that Forge is the enemy and they've got to get Kira back. And they realize he's got a lot of gold coming in. He's restarted these gladiator games. A lot of rich people are bringing in their wealth and making big wagers. They're still thieves. So can we leave with the girl and the gold? We need to build a team again. That's the mission of Act 2.
So they go and find Simon, played by Justice Smith, who we've covered him in Detective Pikachu. The three of us watched him in.
I love him. I think he's a great actor. I really remember thinking in that movie, silly as it sounds, what a standout. He's going to have a big career. He had a little movie this year called I Saw the TV Glow. Really great performance in that. I really think he's a true talent.
I can't go with you on I Saw the TV Glow.
I said he was good. I didn't say the movie was great. I said he was great.
Yeah, I didn't like what he was doing in it with the voice and everything he did.
The movie's a little precious. I don't know that it totally works. He was great, in my opinion.
I wish he was a stronger character in it, but I like him as an actor in the other things I've seen him in. We talked about him in the Jurassic World movies. He seems like someone to watch. I'll agree.
Yeah, and, you know, this is a cliche part. The magician that really isn't very good at magic, that's going to gain his confidence, is in other movies would just be a yawner. I think it's fun to watch him grow into the role. He makes it more interesting. They catch up with him, hoping that he will be good enough to break into the vault, and when all he can do is make it smell like fresh mowed grass and light his finger on fire like a candle, they know they're screwed. They know they need another magic user.
Yeah, but it's misdirection, right? Because he's actually pickpocketing everybody in his audience with magic while he's actually distracting them with lame magic.
Right. Is he good or not is a question.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of his character arc, is that he is robbing all these people while doing these poor magic tricks up front. I feel like he never lives up to that level of thievery again. I liked seeing him, that he didn't go on the straight and narrow as a magician when he lost Elgin and Holga, that he stayed a thief even if he was on his own.
He needs confidence. That's the one reason why he didn't wind up with the girl that he likes. And when they want a stronger magic user, he directs them towards Doric, who, help me out with this. I don't remember D&D enough to understand what a tiefling elf? She has human parents, but she has elf ears.
Being a tiefling means that she has those horns on her head. She doesn't really have elf ears.
Oh, those are horns.
Yeah, she has those big horns coming out of her head, and she is a shapeshifter. I'm not sure if that's something that all tieflings can do or if that's just a her thing.
Mm-hmm. She's ashamed of it, though. I noticed throughout the movie, the one reason why I thought they were ears is she's always putting on a cowl. She's always trying to hide from the human beings that she has this augmentation, because I guess, and this, you know, it's just a nice subtext to have in there, there's this little animosity between the humans and these non-humans, whatever you want to call them, elves.
Yeah, and they may have said it and I didn't follow it necessarily, but I got the sense that she's not full-blood anything. So she's not fully part of the tribe she's living with, and she feels ostracized by humans, so she's kind of a woman alone in the world.
Yeah, and as such, she can then act sort of as this sort of lone savior. Like, she's living in, I think they call it the Emerald Enclave, which is being attacked by Forge. Hugh Grant is having people go out there and execute and torment these people. She's the one that rides in and becomes an owlbear or whatever to save the day.
Yeah, and when they do CGI in this film, it's done well. You know, after seeing all those shitty D&D movies we've covered so far, to see state-of-the-art special effects in a D&D film, especially one that had silly costumes earlier, is surprising. It shows with their budget they have, they can do anything they want. If they're doing silly puppetry, that's because they want a puppet feel. And if they want an owlbear to look like it can kick some ass, there's going to be an owlbear that can kick some ass. And this actress is, I think, very good in this film. Sophia Lillis, I only really know her from those 2 It films where she played young Beverly.
She was also the star of the Osgood Perkins take on Hansel and Gretel. I think it was called Gretel and Hansel, and it's really dark and twisted, and she's good in that one too.
So with her being the owlbear, that was something I was aware of coming into this movie, not only because I'd seen shots of it or whatever, but there's also an action figure of it. And it was one of those things in the back of my mind, I was just kind of like, I didn't know for sure what this character was going to be. And I was kind of thinking, oh boy, this is going to be like the Groot character of this movie, right? We're going to have a big creature that doesn't speak or whatever. I was happy to find out that it's just a shape-shifting thing that she does, and it's not going to be with us the entire time. Because I could see that becoming one of those things where it's just like, okay, this feels a little too much like stuff we've seen several times. I like that they made it a special event throughout the movie.
Right. Yeah, she almost overpowers them, really. It could just be her as the star. I think she even draws that point out. She's like, why do we need Ed? What are you good for except for making bad plans? Like, I'm the one actually doing stuff. And indeed, as they plot on how to get into this vault, they need her more than just about anybody else. She's the one playing spy.
Yeah, she becomes a fly and goes in there and learns that there's this special magical spell over the vault, so they can't get in. Sophina can sense her, though. Sophina starts screaming, and we get this kind of fun shape-shifting chase as Doric goes from a fly to hiding in a suit of armor.
The grain, don't forget, she runs through the grain area, and the zaps turn it all into popcorn.
Yeah, she's a mouse running through.
It's almost done like it's in a single take. I know that it's a composite effect shot, but I love the fact that they shoot it like one long 5-minute scene.
And a little bit of humor there. Was it Holga who recommended that she turns into a deer for some reason? It doesn't need to be a deer. She's not going to be a deer. And part of this escape, her final form is a deer as she escapes through the gates.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like the kind of banter you would expect in a Marvel movie. The kind of clever Easter eggs. We're setting up things, set them up, knock them down. It's got that pizzazz. I would hazard a guess that if you like Marvel, this is more or less doing it in a fantasy realm, which I don't think, if you don't count Thor, they've really done much with.
Thor is as close as we gotten, and so yes, like Justin pointed out with Grandmaster in Ragnarok, I'm seeing a lot of Ragnarok here, but is it just me? I mean, I think Michelle Rodriguez is the worst of the troupe, but while I like each of these people individually, I just don't feel that they ever come together. They never assemble like Avengers. They never banter like the Guardians. They are 3 good actors playing 4 interesting characters, but they never form a unit that I like to see. You know, it's like buddy cop films. You can have 2 good actors, but if they don't form that chemistry in the buddy cop film, you're not going to have a good film.
I don't really have that problem. I feel like they do come together at the end. You could argue that they need to do more stuff together, but they try. They try to give a few scenes throughout this movie where it takes all of their talents to accomplish what they set out to do. And they start off, opposed. They have a moment where everyone threatens to break away. They do what I would expect them to do. I don't think they do it any better or any worse than what I would normally get from a Marvel experience.
I think it's worse. And because they're aping Marvel so openly, that they do it in a lesser way hurts.
I mean, your opinion, I don't love Guardians. I just have to remind folks, I came to appreciate it, but it was a struggle at first. And again, I like this team more.
Yeah, here I am stuck in the middle again with you because I love Guardians and I'm finding this team to be just charming enough to carry the story for me. So I'm very aware throughout this movie that they are aping off of Marvel. And to me, I think, hey, good for it. Others have tried. And to me, this is succeeding so far.
Yeah, it's not like Guardians invented something. They were aping Star Wars and 100 other things. This is the nature of popcorn Hollywood entertainment. They're keeping a tradition going. And I think that, yeah, it's fresh enough because we have the actors we do and because we haven't really seen it done in this medieval kind of way. So it's doing enough new to feel fresh. I also think it helps that Sophia is scary. You know, Hugh Grant could never be a real threat because he's too much of a cad. He's too foolish to be threatening. But there's something about this bald chick that, you know, again, she even has this moment where she's like communicating with the big bad that they're teasing for the sequel. I think his name is Saz Tam, and he's coming out of the fireplace or something like that. But it's a creepy moment. You really feel like she could do real harm.
Yeah, this scene is really testing the black point on your TV screen, right? Like he's standing in the shadows, and my TV felt like it was struggling trying to render his face in the shadows, but I think that's just the way it was shot. Like we're not supposed to be able to make much out other than the fact that it's some sort of human form from the shadows with a deep, gravelly voice.
Yeah, we're going to see a flashback with him where he kind of looks like Snoke from the Star Wars sequels, and he betrays the council of red wizards and kills them all when they're supposed to just be having a powwow.
Yeah, he's a little Snoke, a little Voldemort mixed in.
I mean, Snoke feels like a dig, but, you know, that's just, that's a little cruel. I think he's better than that. But anyway, but what I'm saying is, as light as this movie is, as silly as it is, as maybe copycat as some of the moves that it's making, I'm staying with it. I'm having a good time. And it's kind of working in a D&D threatening just enough. Again, because we have the red wizards, there's just enough element of danger that it feels like more than a goofy heist movie. But it's mostly a goofy movie, and we're going to have these side quests. Holga is going to totally take the team off to meet her ex-husband because she needs closure, right? The joke is, it's Bradley Cooper doing a bit on his knees, right? With special effects. He's a dwarf.
Little hobbit-looking guy, right?
I think he's a halfling. And this was filmed very much later. I don't know who they planned to have as her boyfriend, but they got Bradley Cooper at the 11th hour to come in against a blue screen and film these scenes. I don't know why you get Bradley Cooper for this. I mean, it's kind of a weird turn. This scene falls really flat for me. Again, I mean, I don't feel like Bradley Cooper is really selling anything, and then finding out later he wasn't even on set. That makes sense. I don't feel like Michelle Rodriguez can give me emotion, and so I'm not really seeing much here. We see that Bradley Cooper has a new girlfriend.
New wife. Like, she was his wife, and he divorced her via letter while she was in prison, and he moved on.
And of course, the joke is, it's not just a new girlfriend, it's her. It's like almost a spitting image of her. Gwen is essentially living the life she should have had if she could have appreciated it. What we find out when they actually have an alone moment was that she was so distraught about being kicked out of her tribe, they ostracized her because she loved a short man, and she could never get over that rejection. She could never appreciate the life he was giving her, and so he just had enough.
Yeah, and this scene was more about closure, right? Like, this was the thing that she was holding on to this entire time, is that she needed to get back home to her husband. But really, her character needs to get over this and move on with the next chapter of her life.
Yeah, and all she gets out of it is a walking stick that will turn into an important device later on into the quest. Meanwhile, they're going to go to her ancestors' graveyard and find out about this helmet. One of the ideas hatched by Ed is that if Simon is a powerful enough wizard, all he's got to do is put on this magic helmet and blow open the vault.
And this is my favorite scene in the movie, is this graveyard resurrecting where Simon has a spell that will bring back a corpse for 5 questions, and then that corpse will die again, never to be revived. It's reminding me of a show I absolutely loved, Brian Fuller's Pushing Daisies, where people would die and they'd tap that person, ask them a few questions, and then tap them again and they'd die again. That show was canceled way too soon. Just a great show. And actually, the star of it would play Ronan in Guardians of the Galaxy to bring that full circle. So having them ask these questions, and the first guy they wake up, they're asking each other questions and the corpse is answering and the corpse dies before they can get much information. My favorite scene of the film. It's just funny and light and yet moving the plot along and well filmed. I like this graveyard scene with the puppets. They actually are actors in makeup with puppet arms so that the arms look more skeletal. Just overall a cool scene.
Yeah, it's a good comedy bit, right? It's like asking a genie for wishes and accidentally doing it wrong and finding out that you wish for something wrong, but it's with questions. So yeah, that first time they've figured out what they're doing wrong and they're going to get real concentrated and do it right the next time. And each one kind of leads them a little bit further in the story. And all these men died in an epic battle, except for one guy they found who was actually the brother of the guy they're looking for, who was taking a bath during the battle and slipped on a rock and died when he hit his head. So it's just, that's the type of comedy we're getting here.
Yeah, they can't resist. They've just decided it's time to do some jokes, some yucks, some who's on first bits. And yeah, God bless them. I can see why they let it run long. It probably didn't need to be this long, but it's working. And when comedy is working, and this is more comedy than anything else, you leave the bit in.
It did go too long. They had 10 minutes of deleted scenes on the DVD. Literally 6 of those 10 minutes is the one corpse just talking about the books he likes to read when he was asked what's his favorite book. They let that run for 6 full minutes. I mean, I'm glad they didn't put that in the credits, because you'd be pissed just watching the credits and seeing this corpse talking about the books for that long. But I'm gonna say, while this is my favorite scene, it's a Chris Pine moment. It's Chris Pine always asking the questions. It's Chris Pine who's getting frustrated when he's not getting the right answers. I wish they came together as a team. I feel like Pine is doing a lot of heavy lifting for this movie.
Okay. Yes, in this moment, it is for him to have all of the funny reactions. And yes, we find out that the magic helmet ultimately was taken by one of the Sastam army people. Like, oh, a Thayan got it. This can't be good. Except the rumor is this is an actual exception to the rule. All the other red wizards we see, bad guys. But Zinc Yander is going to be the noblest of noble. And a harper. Someone that is sworn to the same oaths that Ed used to subscribe to boot.
Yeah, he's a real do-gooder, right? And he doesn't quite understand sarcasm or irony. So we're setting ourselves up for another Guardians trope, right? We're walking into a Drax situation.
I love how they introduce him. You know, there is that book for screenwriters, and it's just become a phrase, save the cat. You like a character because in the first 10 minutes of a movie, they save a cat or do something to get you on their side. When we're introduced to this character, he's literally saving a baby cat out of the mouth of a giant fish. And I have to think that that's a subtle wink to the people who know the save the cat trope, that he is literally saving a cat in the first time we see him.
Or a not so subtle wink to people who know it, right? Like it's very blatant, but yeah, it's a grete scene, and it's very character building. We know right away what this guy is about.
Yeah, he seems to make everyone else swoon, but Ed hates him for lots of reasons, including that he's too perfect. The whole time he keeps asking, there's something else here. There's got to be a dark side to this guy. And I believe that. I believe that Ed was on the right track. But in this movie anyway, maybe a sequel would have revealed a new side. In this movie, this guy he is just a do-gooder, a straight arrow, a guy so straight that when he walks, it's always in a straight line. And even if there's rocks in his path, he's not going to walk around it. That's how straight an arrow he is.
But yeah, I mean, some of his comedy moments of him not quite getting what's going on, Ed calls somebody a son of a bitch, and he's like, oh, so you blame his mother? It's like, no, come on. But yeah, he's also very good at what he does, right? He's a very skilled fighter, and he's going to lead them into our first dungeon of the night, right? We've been in the bowels of a castle, but we have not yet been in a dungeon.
Or had a dragon. So we're going to get both here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, time to get to some Dungeons and Dragons. I think that this is where everyone's doing their bit, right? Like, we have him trying to explain how easy it is to cross this bridge that straddles a lava field. And, of course, it sounds needlessly complicated. They'll never get across. And then Simon the Wizard accidentally missteps and the whole thing collapses anyway. And this is when we realize that he can portal them over, that the walking stick is a hither-zither stick.
Hither-tither.
Hither-tither? Okay. It will help everyone in this moment. I think everyone has a contribution that gets them to the helmet and out of all of the peril that is to follow.
Yeah, I'm having fun with this scene. I do think Zink is a little bit too powerful a character. You know, he knows everything. A bunch of assassins are going to come that Sophina was sending after them, these undead assassins, and he's able to defeat them all single-handedly. Of course, being undead, they get back up. But there's no real reason for him to ever leave this movie. He could just stick with them and they could just waltz to the end. Obviously, that's too easy for a film, so they have him leave.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, he even says, this is not my quest. This isn't my movie. I'm walking off in a straight line. Like, I look at this scene as a corporate team building exercise, right? And he's the guy they hired to make sure they all come together as a team. They all use their skills and they work together to escape this cavernous lava pit with a pudgy dragon chasing them.
He also has another function. Before we get to that, and there's a lot to talk about with fat dragons, let's not forget that he is also a Harper and a Thayan, and he explains his backstory, right? He was there when Saz Tam did his whole coup. He watched his own parents get sucked up in this. It's kind of a scary scene, really. Like, this red fog is poisoning everyone. He's a little child looking, he had gotten ahead, waiting for mom and dad to catch up with him. They come out as zombies trying to kill him. Yeah, he's the one Thayan that got away from this. He is not undead. He is not evil. I think it's important to have seen, I think they call it the beckoning death. We need to have seen that in flashback because it's so important to the climax.
Yeah, and we also see for the first time why that horn is in play, right? We see them using that horn to funnel, looks like tree roots growing down and funneling through it and then becoming a very thick red smoke, which is the actual magic that's turning these people into undead zombies.
They're clearly saving him for another movie. I think they hope for a sequel. He was apparently a big star. I don't watch Bridgerton, but he is, I guess, a beloved character on that show. But they also could have just taken him out. I think it would have been a very funny death that there are these like cranium creatures on 4 legs that supposedly only attack you if you're smart. He seems pretty smart to me. It seems like they should have eaten him and left the rest.
Yeah, I do like when they just walk past and Chris Pine's like, well, that was hurtful. Apparently those are actually from a source book somewhere and not used very often in the lore, but they're digging deep with their little creatures here. But yes, not just those are in there, but we get a very, I don't mean to body shame, but he's a fat dragon.
He definitely is. And they have a lot of fun with the idea that he can't get out of his cave and he can't fly to get to them. And yeah, it's a struggle. I think he ends up rolling to try and kill half of these guys.
And so perfectly animated too, because I mean, how many videos have you seen of fat cats or fat dogs that don't realize their size and they think they can just hop up on whatever? And it's just like, nope, they are very uncoordinated and they end up rolling around and bopping their nose on stuff. And this dragon's doing all of that stuff.
But I noticed this one scene where Doric is like hanging off of a bridge that they're trying to jump over, and the dragon jumps up and she's pulled out just in time. That is like a shot for shot of Jurassic Park where the little girl was hanging and the raptor is jumping up at her. So they're homaging the best here while doing it in a funny fat dragon kind of way.
And again, I think you're seeing everyone doing their best, that Simon's able to portal them up to a higher platform. And, you know, I think, I almost called her Gamora, but Holga, takes out some of these zombie people. And of course, Zink is able to slay the dragon. I see team building that's happening here. It's just maybe not the best stuff. I'll give you, Arnie, that it would be nice to see another movie with this team coming tighter together. There's more to explore with them, but I think this is all we're going to get.
Oh yeah, I think so. But they finally escaped the dragon.
Because of Ed. Because he knew how to use everyone's skills, right? Everyone participates in the dragon. I don't know if it's corpulence or it just has forgotten how to use fire, but he uses it. The magician has the flame finger, and I think they all do something to make sure that this dragon creates the blast that gets them to the surface of the ocean.
Yeah, I think they recognized that while the dragon was chasing them, he was never able to actually create fire, but he had the flammable liquid coming out of his mouth. So every time there was a torch or something, he was able to breathe fire.
So they all get to the surface, mostly because Ed was able to plan it and utilize, like a coach, their best skills. And now this is where his plan falls apart. Simon was supposed to put on the helmet and do great things, and Simon puts on the helmet and gets beat up by his great-great-grandfather.
Yeah, this is kind of the all is lost moment, right? Because this is also where Rege-Jean is going to reveal that the reason his wife died is because he gave in to his weakness and stole the gold of the Red Wizard, and that's how they found his home and killed his wife, and Simon can't use the helmet, and they don't know what to do next.
Doric wants to leave, and yeah, really the only one that is standing put is Holga. Like, she's the one trying to unify all of them. They eventually appreciate what Ed is trying to do and realize they don't have plans themselves. It's easy to criticize, but when you don't have a better plan, and when the games are about to start, you just have to go with the improvisation.
Well, and it's really the character moment for Ed, right? This is where he comes to terms with himself and in front of them that he is somewhat of a fraud, right? He's calling them all out for their weaknesses, and they ask about him, and he's able to verbalize that, yes, I am the biggest failure of us all. And I think that's all they needed to hear to humanize him and follow his lead.
It does feel like self-help book gone wrong when he's like, never give up to being a failure because the minute you stop, you fail. But I get what he's after. Again, we like the idea that they're underdogs, that you would count this team out, but they have a new plan. They have this portal stick that if they can put a portal on one of the pieces of treasure going into the vault, well, then that's how they get in the vault. They don't need no helmet.
Yeah, I love that they go through this whole heist of sneaking onto a carriage where it's going to be easy because they're looking for people taking things off the carriage, not putting things on. And then they put the portal on the mirror, the portal gets in the vault, and it falls on its face. Now they can't get in anyway. So most of this was for nothing.
Yeah, like a true Ocean's 11 movie. You always have to improvise. No matter how good you are at planning, there's always chaos. Doric is going to get in there by being a worm. She'll eventually chip her way in, but they had to think of new things.
And so they need a distraction here. And perhaps the biggest laugh I got in this film is when Chris Pine just strolls into the courtyard playing his, what do you call that? A lute? What is that little instrument?
A lute.
It's almost reminding me of Total Recall when Arnold Schwarzenegger's in that old woman costume in the 2 weeks. Only this time, Chris Pine starts to stutter and melt, and it obvious CG, but it's fitting the tone of this film so well. I'm actually laughing as his music is stuttering and his chin is melting.
And we had forgotten that he was a bard. Again, it's asked throughout the movie, what's this guy's purpose? He just comes up with bad plans, but he does have some musical talent, I guess.
And this actually was Chris Pine doing the stuttering. On some of the behind-the-scenes footage, they had dots on his face so they could melt his face, but the stuttering, the singing, the repeating, that was actually his performance, not digital manipulation. I was pretty impressed with that.
I enjoyed it. Visually, it reminded me of Guardians of the Galaxy when they go into jumps, and the rocket's eyes start bulging out and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was a good little comic bit here.
And they had to go back to Simon putting on that helmet. Again, we want to see him get that confidence. We want to see him succeed. The movie needs to give everyone their moment. And certainly, once he gets to the vault door and finally slaps his great-grandfather, he's ready to do it all.
And that wasn't his great-grandfather, right? That was him in the future. He says, "Who are you, my great-grandfather?" And so we just assume it's his great-grandfather. The other person never said who he was. And then once Simon gets the confidence, then the person we thought was the great-grandfather turns into just like an older Simon and says it took you long enough.
Well, the way I took it is this. Maybe there is some story about who he will be in the future, but I took it to mean that he thought he was battling a legend. I come from a line of great wizards. I'm not a great wizard. And really what he was fighting was himself and not that legend, right?
Yeah, I kind of took it as the Dagobah cave, right? He only fights what he takes in with him, right? So he needs to overcome himself, his lack of confidence in himself.
It's all very Wizard of Oz to me, you know? It's all very,
sure.
The Tin Man needs a heart and the lion needs courage.
It's cliche. I agree. This character is not a radical reconception of a wizard character from a adventure movie. But again, I like the way Justin Smith is playing it, and I think it's fun to watch step into his confidence, and he will even get the confidence to ask Doric. He implies they're on their second date, and he'll get another date out of this. He ends up being what she needs.
And we all know what the third date means, so good for him.
But ultimately, all of these plans A, B, C, and D fail because they get caught by Sophia in every level. She's onto them, and she captures them with some tentacles that come through the floor and is ready to snuff them out there. But Ed convinces them to let them fight in the games that are going on.
They had to do this, right? The second we heard that it's teams of 5, I'm like, well, you can't tell us that and then not put them in to the games. That would be a cheat if we didn't get to see some of this stuff. It's kind of contrived, but sure, why not throw them into the Hunger Games, throw them into the Maze Runner, and see how well they do?
Against the characters from the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. We talked about that cartoon and the toys based on that cartoon way back with that Tom Hanks movie review. Well, they're here. I didn't recognize them because obviously they're not cartoons, but one of the other teams are all the characters from there. We do get to see like a little boy barbarian run up to a chest and pull an axe out of it. That was Bobby.
Now I want to see this scene again. Okay. I didn't catch it at all.
They did a great job of teasing it because first time you see them, they're just kind of running in behind our main characters and you just get a flash of them. But then we do catch up to them in the maze and we get to see a little bit more of them and we get to see the wizard. And we definitely see Eric. I recognize Eric's cape there, but I think they were all there. I'd like to go back and pause it and get a look at all of them.
How fun. It didn't even occur to me, that animated movie, but yeah. They don't all die, right? Some of them do, but some of them get to some cage, which is called the end. You know, the maze itself is always changing with every gong. The layout changes and they're facing new pathways, but it looked like some of them got away.
Yeah, the ones who are in that cage are all the ones from the cartoon. So they presumably lived because they called it the Cage of Living, but they didn't win.
And Ed didn't want to go out that way. He wanted to fight back. And so they do a whole complicated thing. There are these, I don't know what the manual name for them are, but they look like panthers with tentacles on them that are chasing them around. They do a whole thing about jumping through a dissolving cube.
Gelatinous cube, yeah.
It's clever. It allows Doric to get the wrist cuff that prevents her from using magic off of her and kills a beastie or two and sets us up for a finale where, yeah, they're running to the boat and stopping Hugh Grant from getting away with the daughter. And there's no denying it, right? Kira, you know, whatever the lies were, when Uncle Forge is pulling a knife on you, you know you've been had. She's now going to be convinced after this traumatic moment that Ed really is a genuine guy, that he really did only leave her so that he could bring her mother back to life with that tablet.
And all of Forge's riches are on that boat too. So by taking the boat, they're not just getting away with Kira, but they get the tablet of reawakening and they get all the fortune. And so they have it made. The thieves have taken all the gold from the city, even though Rege-Jean did promise Zank that he would give all of those riches back to the people. Here they are leaving town and keeping it all because Rege-Jean never really was going to give it back anyway.
Yeah, but to get back to the title of this movie, Honor Among Thieves, it was stated very early on that one of the reasons why we can go with thieves as being characters is they only rob from the rich and they don't hurt anybody in the process. So when they turn to the horizon and see red tentacles coming down and Sophia bringing on that beckoning death once again, their do-gooder, thief, honorary code demands that they turn around and try and deliver on that promise.
Yeah, and we find Forge, finally made his way back out of the water because he was wiped out by a wave that was created by Simon. And now he's telling the harbor master, he's like, go find the boat. There's a boat. And it just kind of pulls right back up behind him. So Forge thinks that he's in the clear. He gets on his boat and he's going to escape while the team rushes back into what is now another scene with our sorceress starting to zombify this huge crowd.
It is scary. Again, there's something about this moment that is like, ugh, just a little tinge of uncomfortable. They only kill the rich. I guess we're supposed to be okay with that. The red smoke comes down and kills the rich people that were betting on lives being lost. It would have gotten everyone else in the arena, all the poor people, except they've portaled it, right? All the gold is following out of that boat that Hugh Grant is at and coming out of the mouth of his face on a hot air balloon that is going to lead all the poor people away from the danger.
This definitely reminded me of some of the Grandmaster at the end of Ragnarok scenes with the gold all coming out and Hugh Grant trying to catch the gold and all of that, crying that all of his riches are being gone. He was never that big of a baddie, and so this is just a just enough comeuppance. Our big bad is Sophina, and Hugh Grant can be allowed to live, which is rare for bad guys in these movies, but Sophina's the one who we have to worry about.
Yeah, she's scary, and she's really, she's got a whole lot of spells. She can throw fireballs, purple lightning, she can turn a statue of a dragon alive. We will see her using her whole bag of tricks here in a lot of, again, spinning camera. It feels like one-shots. I don't know if they really are, but they give the impression, the way they move around, that we're seeing a whole lot happen in one take.
And even what sounds corny on paper, I think still works out well on screen, is she's having a fist fight, literally, with Simon, because she's conjured some sort of magic red fist, and Simon conjures a big fist out of rocks.
Mm-hmm. Arm wrestling and catching each other and all of that stuff. Yeah, they have a lot of fun with all of these little details. I feel like, it has the oomph of a Marvel movie. If you like that stuff, they're doing it just as well as some of the better versions.
Well, right down to Doric turning into the owlbear again and basically hulking her into the ground until she's dead.
There's no way we're not thinking about Hulk taking out Loki, right?
And when those two CGI hands are going at it, it's kind of funny because it's like they're playing a game of Mercy with bending the hands back and things like that. It's just a very expensive way to portray a very childish fight between these two.
Yeah, again, keeping the sense of humor that even in this dark moment where hundreds of people were almost poisoned, we can pivot away from that and laugh it off. Sophina had this in-move. The thing that got them caught was she has a time stop. She can release this, I almost want to call it a bomb, but this expanding force field that when you get caught in it, you're just frozen in time. And that was how she got them before. We think she's got them again in that way, but it's all a ruse. I like how everyone, again, the daughter that had the invisibility pendant is able to slap on the wrist cuff that prevents the magic, and everyone else joins in here. Owlbear getting the punches. They all do their bit to take down Sophina. I feel like everyone made that happen.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Marvel again, it kind of feels like, when the whole team was going against Thanos, right? Like they all get in their special moves, and eventually it takes the whole team to take her down.
But this movie has one more trick up its sleeve, and maybe we knew it was coming, right? I feel like there was a scene. There's a lot of scenes of Ed having dreams, and one of his dreams was of his wife standing at a window, and a dragon, like a dragonfly sort of symbolizes who she is, and she talks about letting it go. Don't try to capture it, but let it go. Heavy-handed metaphor for the idea of bringing this wife back to life. Well, I kind of knew that it wasn't going to happen. I didn't ever think that husband and daughter were going to see Zia again. The reason being is that Holga has a knife in her heart, and they have to choose between someone that actually was the mother to Kira and someone that they only really knew from distant memories.
So it's obvious which way they're going to go. I wish it was more of a choice. It seems just like a foregone conclusion that this is what Chris Pine is going to do. I wish he had to wrestle with it a little more. He'd been wanting nothing but to bring his wife back for so long that it seems really easy that he's like, well, I can only use this once. But I mean, on a logical level, I'll agree. It's been years since his wife was dead. I mean, his daughter's, a teenager now, so his wife's been gone for 10 years or more. He's not the same person who she was married to. I mean, you definitely need some couples counseling if she did come back, but I would have liked to have seen him wrestle with it a little more, and the daughter wrestle with it a little more, too.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to do with a knife in the heart. You only have a couple seconds there.
But the wife's been dead for a decade. There is no rush to make this decision for Holga.
Good point. And where is her body? And what would it be like for her to come back?
Couldn't you at least raise her for 5 questions without any penalty and then ask, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I mean, and it's obvious the movie doesn't want us to ponder this question too much, right? Because we really haven't seen his wife since the beginning flashback, right? I mean, they do a little bit of a quick scene in the middle of the movie and then another quick scene here. But as a viewer of this movie, I don't feel like I know much about his wife at all. We know way more about Helga. And that is the choice the movie wants him to make.
Yeah, she seems saintly. Again, this sign of the dragonfly and, ethereal quality. I no doubt that there was a romantic love there, but I guess this movie's theme is that sometimes the real bind is platonic friendship, the teammates, the fact that Helga was there in his weak moments and Kira knows her, that's the one that they need. And, a dragonfly lands on his sleeve, so it seems to be like the wife from beyond the grave is condoning all of this. They don't need a razor corpse ask those questions, Arnie, because the dragonfly told them it was okay.
Well, if the dragonfly says it, that's not confirmation bias at all.
But as this is all happening, we see Hugh Grant running away. He only saved one chalice. He's got like one gold cup in his hand, running through the forest, getting tripped up by the one good Thayan, Zenk. And he is the narrator for the epilogue. He tells us how everything goes from this point.
I do like this at the end where, Justin, you pointed out earlier that Zenk thought that the problem with Forge was his mother because Holga called him a son of a bitch. And now here he is at the end. He's like, oh, it was my mother's fault. And he's also waiting for Jarnathan, and he's going to try to recreate that escape, only they've bricked up the window. They learned from their mistake. So it's a good callback joke punchline.
Yeah, good bookend. We started the movie in this room. We're going to end the movie in this room.
And never forget that he had put the real lord of this town in some kind of spell, had him taken out of commission. That guy wakes up, rewards everyone, tells the Emerald Enclave that they'll be formally protected. It's a happy ending for all with just the little tease that you might have missed, but that guy from the fireplace, Zaz Tam, is still out there. If there were a sequel, that's what they would be fighting. And maybe Holga would be dating another short guy.
Yeah, she makes some googly eyes at a short guy in this ceremony at the end.
And then we do get a credit scene. It's not going to tease a sequel. It's going to just be one more little gag if you stay for the credits. They didn't ask the last corpse the 5th question. They asked him 3, and he's like, can you ask me 2 more? They ask him about books, and he just prattles on, so they leave. And he's still awake in the graveyard, wanting somebody to ask him that 5th question so he can go back to death. It's my favorite scene of the movie, so it's a nice ending note.
Yeah, they've had a lot of lovable creatures and things that you could put on t-shirts and figures and what have you. If anyone wanted to buy them, I think it's nice to remind us of that little moment. I think it's a shame that no one is going to ask him the question or ask for part 2.
Well, let me ask Justin Stewart, do you recommend Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves? Justin.
There's no getting around it, right? We've referenced Marvel so many times throughout this, but I think that's by design, right? And if you're going to go into a movie like this and ape off of Marvel, well, they picked my favorite Marvel properties to go after. I'm a huge fan of Guardians. I'm a huge fan of Thor Ragnarok. Both of those exemplify the type of humor I like in my Marvel movies with the same type of heart and stuff. So if that's what they're going to go for as far as a tone, I'm going to get on board. So I'm on board with that. But is that enough to keep me going with a movie like this? Because ultimately, this is a fantasy movie, right? So you got to start thinking, what does modern day fantasy look like? Well, over the last 10, 15 years, it's been Game of Thrones, right? They're the kings of the fantasy genre. And I think they bring enough of that in here, too, for a little bit more of a serious, heavy tone. But they also knew enough to make this movie look good. We've been sitting here watching so many of these cheap Dungeons and Dragons movies that this is going to look great by comparison. But if we compare this to other movies of the day, this looks just as good as any huge budget Marvel movie. They did not skimp here is what I'm saying. And is that enough for a recommend? Well, I think if you're going to do this, you got to bring some of your own original stuff here too. And I think there's plenty of original stuff in this movie peppered in that I think gives it enough heart to make this a lovable movie. We talked about the pudgy dragon. That is unique and funny. We've talked about the raising the dead in the graveyard. That's a great scene. And I think there's just tons of little stuff like this peppered throughout. And I think everybody in this movie knows the assignment and what they're doing. I don't feel like anybody was miscast or out of place here. So I'm happy to give this movie a solid recommend. I would watch it again. And I'm actually kind of bummed it didn't do well enough to get a sequel or a trilogy out of this.
Stuart.
Yeah, it's taken 5 films. But finally, a recommendable D&D movie. And not the one that I would have thought. Again, maybe it is obvious that you chase the dragon's tail of Marvel and do Guardians of the Galaxy. It wouldn't have occurred to me. You say Dungeons and Dragons, and I just thought that it would be sort of a grim, swords and sorcery, mystical, self-serious kind of film. Bringing in the humor is risky. Having a 2-hour comedy is really risky. You really risk the idea of having the joke go on too long. And fortunately, they have an incredibly talented cast that knows how to keep telling good jokes and do things other than joke. I do think this movie has some heart. I think it has some fun action. I think it is able to do a lot of things well. And I do think that it keeps all the balls in the air. Usually a film like this can be kind of exhausting after a while. You want off the ride. You feel like, okay, I'm done, but there's 15 more minutes to go. And I can honestly say, every set piece works for me. Every cast member works for me. This is perfect popcorn entertainment. It's a solid recommend.
Hey, TSR, or Hasbro, whoever owns D&D these days. I know you wrote the sacred tomes of RPGs, but now you're cribbing from Marvel's campaign notes. I mean, this adventure clearly rolls with Marvel-style antics, especially Guardians of the Galaxy. Misfit criminals unite, break out of prison, and save the day, all with quippy banter. And that's not a bad approach for making the arcane world of Dungeons & Dragons more accessible. And credit where it's due, the 5-question corpse gag is a nat 20 on humor, even if it may be a joke that's dragged on a little too far. But why doesn't this party cast friendship on me the way Guardians did? It's not just that it's not Marvel, because if we go back to the tapes, I was plenty skeptical going into Guardians too. But that team I felt had synergy. Even with a CGI raccoon, that chemistry was magic. Here, Chris Pine rolls high on charisma as our Star-Lord stand-in, but the party dynamic feels off. Michelle Rodriguez fits the tough warrior role, but she's all strength, no finesse, lacking Zoe Saldana's wit and charm. Justin Smith's self-doubt arc works, but again, it's straight out of The Wizard of Oz. Sophia Lillis is a fun, wild-shaped druid, but her character arc is stuck at level 1. Individually, these PCs are well built, but together, no real party cohesion. Hugh Grant, playing a chaotic neutral rogue, is delightful, but he's kind of underused. He's gone for most of the movie, with Sophia becoming the big bad, and she lacks the personal stakes to make the final battle have gravitas. That end fight looks great, but it doesn't hit great. The real villainy, Forge stealing Edgin's daughter, had more stakes. So yeah, this quest is visually polished and has some solid character moments, but the campaign on a whole doesn't fully gel. And when I first watched this last year, I rolled a not recommend. On a second viewing, and after suffering through far worse D&D adaptations, I'm gonna adjust that to a recommend. It's not legendary loot, but it's a serviceable one-shot adventure. But unlike you, Justin, frankly, I'm not mourning the lack of sequels. There just wasn't enough here to love that I'd want to come back to.
I could turn it around, though, and say what they didn't get right, and I'll agree with you. more teamwork would be more fun. A sequel would demand that, right? We've already set up who each of these people are individually. We can have them work more closely, change the dynamics up more, get more out of it. Origin movies are tough, and then you build off of that. I think it could have been a good sequel. I think it should have been. They should have been given a chance. And it is kind of a bummer that we're not going to get, I don't know, we'll get D&D again, right? It's still popular with the kids. Stranger Things, people are playing it. New generations are discovering it. So someone will try again, but it won't look like this.
No, they talked about doing like a TV series spin-off, but those talks kind of dwindled. The year that this came out, Paramount CEO said a sequel could happen, but it would need to have a much smaller budget because of the box office of this film. And I don't know that you're going to get these people back for a much smaller budget and still have the film not look as cheap as Book of Vile Darkness. So I do think that this campaign is at an end. And, it took 23 years for there to be a new D&D movie after the first one. I didn't even know when we were talking about doing D&D movies that there were those 2 direct-to-video things. I just thought 23 years passed and there was no D&D. So I guess we can look forward to 2046 being the next time Dungeons & Dragons tries for the big screen.
I don't know. I feel like they're rebooting Spider-Man and Superman every 3 to 5 years. I think we're going to get it much, much sooner. 3 years? I'll go 3 years.
I'm not chomping at the bit for more Dungeons and Dragons as a property per se. What I really liked was this cast and the dynamic here. So if they're not going to sequel this, I'm not super interested. But I could see them going the animated route, right? Like it seems to be big in other properties. I could see an animated series coming out of this.
So many ways you could take it. And again, it was a surprise that it went comedy. It's only because of Guardians that they dared try. But I thought it worked. And maybe whatever they try next depends on who's involved, right? Depends on if they have the right chemistry participants. I don't know. I'll say this. Board games were better than video games for me. I had some ones that I really liked in this. Ouija 2, this movie, Clue, and I found Battleship amusing. I feel like there was some good ones here where I don't know. Did I like any of the video game movies? Not really.
I was going to say the closet with the board game movies in it isn't as dark and dank as the cabinet with the video game movies.
I mean, there's just so many fewer board game movies. We are still reviewing video game movies. We are going to be doing one next week, whereas we've covered all the official board game adaptations already. So, yes, I'd say the mean score is higher for board games just by the fact that there's so many less of them.
There's also just better movies, right? There's no video game movie as good as Clue, or even this film.
No, Clue is a special case, but I would say there are video game movies that are better than any other board game movie we've covered. I would put the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy above any of these other board game films.
I noticed you didn't say anything about Knuckles' TV show, though.
We know where that's going. And you're right, we haven't seen them all because this weekend, opening up on all these screens is a horror video game that everyone has played and loved that I don't know anything about. Until Dawn is apparently a big deal and a super hard property to adapt. And they have a novel twist. It looks like kind of a cabin in the woods kind of environment with lots of different scenarios and monsters involved. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out, play it this weekend, and be back with you on Tuesday to talk about video games.
Yeah, I'm going to have to find some time to play the video game. The game itself has a big cast. I don't know if the movie will, but the game has Rami Malek, Hayden Panettiere, Brett Dalton, Peter Stormare, so there's a lot of mocap and voice acting from well-known people in the game. We'll see if that happens to help the movie at all.
And if you're an April patron, I've dogged Brian De Palma movie after movie, and only to eat my words. I don't like Brian De Palma, and then it's Carrie, and then it's Mission Impossible, then it's Untouchables, then it's Dressed to Kill, then it's even Body Double I came around on. Can I be so kind to Femme Fatale, a movie that I don't remember anybody liking when it came out at the turn of the millennium, starring Antonio Banderas and Rebecca Romaine Stamos.
I'd never heard of it until it was a patron pick, but it does feel like slowly Kubrick and De Palma were just checking off their filmographies, and Carpenter too. You know, those are the ones that it feels like we're hitting the big ones on, and now even going deeper in depth. So I'm up for any time discussing more De Palma. I've enjoyed most of the ones we have discussed. There have been some real surprises in there for me. Blowout, which is in our book, was a huge surprise for me, and Body Double, which we reviewed last year, was a surprise for me, so maybe Femme Fatale will be too.
Yeah, I'm not going to be as cynical. I'm not going to even diss it. It really could be good. I wouldn't dare, at this point, risk saying that it's a stinker, but it does not have a great reputation. We'll see if we can resuscitate that reputation this Friday. Join us. Be a patron. Find out.
Yes, it is for patrons of $10 or more on Apple, Patreon, or Podbean, and for that $10 a month, you get access to well over 100 exclusive bonus reviews, including that Brian De Palma film Body Double, classics like Apocalypse Now and Enter the Dragon, and niche films like Coherence and The Man from Earth. All kinds of films are covered, and you can only hear those reviews by being a $10 a month patron. So thank you for listening to Now Playing. Thanks for your support of Now Playing. Justin Stewart, thanks for RPing with me. And until next time, it's time to pick up the pieces and go home.
And so, we played the game again, for one last time. It didn't matter that there were no maps, or dice, or no monsters. Pardue saw the monsters. We did not. We saw nothing but the death of hope, and the loss of our friend. And so we played the game until the sun began to set, and all the monsters were dead.
Thank you for listening to this Now Playing Podcast movie review.
I've enjoyed our little chat, but now it's your time to die.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
A wonderful performance.
Help us spread the word about this show by leaving a 5-star review on Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, or your podcast store of choice.
This I give you now, trusting that you will protect it with your very life.
Want more reviews like this one? In the archives section of NowPlayingPodcast.com, you'll find more than 1,000 in-depth movie reviews from our panel of hosts.
Welcome to the Adventurer's Vault.
On our site, you can hear reviews for every installment in the world's biggest film franchises, including the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars, Spider-Man, Batman, X-Men, James Bond, Middle-earth, Jurassic Park, Fast and Furious, and Transformers.
Are you listening to me? All I do is listen.
Plus, we have individual movie reviews, such as Titanic, E.T., Inception, Big Hero 6, Ready Player One, Pulp Fiction, Apocalypse Now, Doctor Strangelove, and hundreds more.
Has anyone ever finished it before?
No. They all died trying.
And come back to NowPlayingPodcast.com next Tuesday for another all-new movie review podcast.
Nothing can keep me from it.
Support from listeners like you keeps Now Playing Podcast on the air.
Give me some food and I'll give you a prize.
You can donate directly by tapping the support button at NowPlayingPodcast.com.
We are you gotta get. And right about now, we gotta get paid.
And you can join our crowdfunding campaign for early access to new episodes, exclusive reviews, and bonus reviews available for a one-time contribution.
This isn't about gold, it's about saving our empire.
Need more Now Playing? Subscribe to our In Focus weekly newsletter for exclusive digital download giveaways, celebrity interviews, behind-the-scenes insights, and more. Sign up through the subscribe page on our website and get it delivered to your inbox every Friday.
If you wish to join the others in death, insert your name below and I will notify your kin.
You can also compare notes with us on Letterboxd. Go to letterboxd.com/nowplaying.
You may take my hand, and I will lead you. I'll tell you right now, I'm not taking his hand.
And follow Now Playing on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our YouTube channel.
Follow me, I know the way.
Now Playing Podcast is produced by Arnie Carvalho.
Giving birth to this nightmare is my most coveted dream.
Associate produced by Jason Latham.
I'm a god and a lord. I am really doing all right.
Now Playing is edited by Santiago and Arnie.
So we're the cleaning crew.
Cleanup crew's more like it.
Now Playing credits read by Brock.
You will speak only when spoken to.
Speak when spoken to, my ass.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual hosts and may not reflect the views of Venganza Media Incorporated.
A lot of dwarves are afraid to show their true feelings. I'm not, okay?
Venganza Media Incorporated is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by any entity that created the film analyzed herein.
You may have forsworn your oath, but your oath hasn't forsworn you. Just because that sentence is symmetrical doesn't make it not nonsense.
All movie clips and music included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended.
Yeah, well, have you ever heard of Honor Among Thieves? We might live outside the law, but we respect each other.
Now Playing Podcast is an exclusive trademark of and may not be used without the express written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated.
The dark will never triumph, as long as the light inside me prevails.
Now Playing is a Venganza Media production, copyright 2025, and no part of this show may be reproduced, repurposed, or redistributed without the written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated. All rights reserved.
The most frightening monsters are the ones that exist in our minds.
Perlomon Tergatis.
That Jason Bateman, Rachel McAdams Netflix movie, I kind of enjoyed it.
It wasn't a Netflix movie. I saw it in theaters.
Well, I saw it on Netflix, so it's a Netflix movie to me.
I think that's probably where it's best enjoyed. It really wasn't a theatrical experience. But I think that was when I was MoviePass crazy.
Perlomon Tergatis.